And welcome to the Go Earn It podcast. Once again, Shane Sparks, and I am another level of fired up today. Great guest on the show, five-time All-American, two-time national champion. He's a Big Ten champion, 2023 World Team member, chop wood, carry water. Nick Lee, one of the toughest guys that's ever set foot on the Resolite. Nick, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. How are we doing today?
I appreciate you having me, Shane. I'm doing well.
Nick, let's start with this. You and I, truth be told, have been talking for about the last hour before we began recording this. It's been a phenomenal conversation. And one thing that we talked about, I read that you did not swear growing up, and you and I got talking about swearing. Yeah. And I asked you, I'm like, Nick, do you swear now? And your response was what?
I don't. I try not to. And I told you this as well. I said I would be lying if I said I don't swear, here and there. And, I was a college kid as well, so I definitely swear here and there. But I really try not to, and it bothers me whenever I'm around people that swear a lot. So.
And I was telling you, and this is going to be a life-changing conversation for me because because of this conversation, Nick, I'm going to try to stop because I'll be the first to admit I like a good F-bomb, but as I was telling you, I drop too many F-bombs, but when I'm listening to other people that drop F-bombs, it turns me off a little bit. So you and I talking off air, finally, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. It finally got through to me like, well, if you think that, Shane, other people probably do as well. Talk about your grandmother and her influence on your reasoning behind also not swearing. This is pretty good.
Sure, yeah. So she's educated to a very, very high level in English. And she tutored me in English through high school and even in college a little bit. And one of the things that she told me is if you're swearing, that means you're usually whenever you're swearing, you're emphasizing something to a great degree. And so whenever you swear, you're lacking some sort of vocabulary to emphasize that properly. And so, I mean, you just think about it, how often people are using swear words in different situations, and we use it to replace all these different vocabulary words when there's so many great words in the English language to use to accurately describe something. So it'll be a challenge for you, Shane. You can figure out some other words to use to emphasize things.
Spectacular. Nick, tell us about your family.
Sure. So my immediate family, I have my mom, Laura, my dad, Chris, and then I have two brothers, Joe and Matt. Joe and Matt are still in college here. Joe's in his last semester at Penn State, and he is on the wrestling team. And then my brother Matthew's on the wrestling team, and he has a few years of eligibility left, I think. COVID always throws me off, so I think he has 2 years of eligibility left, 2 or 3. And then my mom and dad raised us in Evansville, Indiana, and they are just about as hard as workers as they are. I mean, they go to work every day, and they try to make it out to wrestling when we can. I don't think they liked us being too far away in Pennsylvania for college, but I think the results made it a little bit better. So,
your dad was in the military.
Yes,
I've seen different podcasts, well documented. He was gone when you were, 5, 6 years old. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, so whenever I was very young, he was deployed in Bosnia for during the Yugoslavian split and everything that was going on over there. And then he was deployed in Afghanistan for 16 months whenever I was in first grade, so around 5 or 6 years old. But I mean, that's definitely hard. It's obviously, I don't remember it as much as I remember the lessons. My mom would have a fresher memory on kind of how that was, but there's definitely some tough memories there, but I think that, like I said, it kind of built character, and also I definitely grew up with, a pride in my dad's military service, and it definitely has, shaped the way that I view the world growing up and stuff. And I like to think I'm a pretty open-minded person, but we all have our different experiences that kind of shape the way that we look at things. So and then growing up also with my dad being a military man, we were raised in a pretty strict household. So the values that you would associate with the military were a big part of our childhood, right? Discipline and work ethic and that kind of thing. And also I would say big ones outside of discipline and work ethic that may be specific to the military would be you know, teamwork and helping your team, being selfless, and that kind of thing. So, and that all kind of worked together to create, I guess, a team of three brothers. I guess we are. So, and we all are good at different things. So,
Why Penn State?
so this is something a lot of people don't know, but I actually was thinking about not wrestling in college, and a lot of people are surprised whenever they hear that. I know, right? But because wrestling is a sport that I really love, but also I was, took my studies very seriously, and I wanted to be a doctor at the time, which everybody wants to be a doctor whenever they go into college. So I was like, okay, well, it's going to be hard to wrestle and be in pre-med or whatever it is. So I was thinking about maybe not wrestling, and I think I kind of knew I would, but there's the possibility there. Both my parents went to for undergrad went to a smaller liberal arts school in Indiana, and so that there was always that option available. But I took my unofficial visits, and I think that without kind of saying where I was thinking about, because a lot of the coaches are still coaches at where they are, and they're all really great people. But I went to Penn State, and I met the people at Penn State, and it was a very different environment, and it made me feel very wanted and welcomed, and it was somewhere where I felt like I would enjoy my time, not just as a wrestler, but just as, a human being. You're going to spend a lot of years, wherever you go to college. And it's been almost 8 years now that I've lived here, because I came here for a year at the end of high school. And so I spent pretty much my entire adult life here. I moved here whenever I was 18, and I don't regret it. I in my personal opinion, and I'm a little bit biased, but I feel like every day I'll walk into the wrestling room and I'm surrounded by the highest caliber of person in the entire world, let alone wrestlers in the entire world. Right? We have great wrestlers, but we have high caliber people as well. And so it's a blessing that a lot of people, I get imposter syndrome sometime walking in there, but it's really awesome. And I'm very blessed.
I always enjoy asking guys like yourself the what if. So I'll just ask it.
Yeah.
If you didn't go to Penn State, where would you have gone?
Shane, I'm not going to answer that.
Kyle Snyder, Virginia Tech. If he didn't go to Ohio State, we went to Virginia Tech.
I'm going to ask him about that.
Yeah,
but
he told me, I was like, wow, never knew that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of friends that went to a lot of schools just around the area. I used to train. We would train a lot at Indiana and Illinois RTCs. So I knew the guys there. And actually, funny, whenever I committed to Penn State, my grandma, not my grandmother Mary, but my grandma Marge, who's my dad's mom, and they grew up, bleeding cream and crimson for IU. And I was raised that way. And so I still, whenever IU is playing, I stop flipping the channels and I watch whatever sport it is. But I remember I committed to Penn State, and my grandma was like, well, you know that Indiana has a wrestling team, right? And I was like, yeah, I know. So it was a fun story.
When you were growing up, Nick, were you a college wrestling fan?
Shane, once again, you won't believe this. I went to a few national championships whenever they were in St. Louis. I think I went to one or two.
Okay.
But the first time I ever watched the national championships or college wrestling on television was after I committed to Penn State. And I turned on the nationals that year because that was the team that I was going to be wrestling for. And I was like, oh man, these guys are pretty darn good. I had watched the nationals a few times in person, but I had never watched a college wrestling duel on television before that point. I was I don't know what I was interested in. I was a little bit of a nerd as a kid. So
do you remember when you watched that first NCAA finals? Do you remember a guy that stood out specifically, like one guy where man, this guy left an impression?
Yeah, actually, it was an interesting year because it was a year that it was kind of a reload year for Penn State, and so they had redshirted a lot of guys. But it was a year that Nico Megalou just won a national championship, and I just remember him. Every match he just took to the final second and never slowed down. And he was a big influence on me as well whenever I was a gray shirt, and he was part of the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club here, and we would wrestle all the time. And He's just a guy that he's going to give 110% no matter what he does. And still to this day, he's the same guy. And that's what I love about him. So, yeah, I remember watching him, grind out to a national championship win. And it was pretty fun to watch.
You might have just answered my next question. I was going to ask when
Yeah.
you got to Penn State, who was a guy or two that had the biggest impact on you as a young kid coming in?
Yeah. So the Ninny Line Wrestling Club, whenever I was a gray shirt, and for those who don't know, I skipped my senior year of high school. I had already, finished enough credits to apply to Penn State. And I came and I trained with the Ninny Line Wrestling Club as a high schooler for a year. And I did that. I wrestled in Who's Number One, Bill Farrell, and like the US Open. And that was all I did that year. And other than that, I just trained. There was the Ninny Line Wrestling Club was smaller at that point. It was pretty much Nico Megaludis, Frank Molinaro, and then we had WCAP guys, Matt Brown, former Penn State wrestler. He was with the Ninny Line Wrestling Club at that time, and then David Taylor was as well. So it was kind of a smaller Ninny Line Wrestling Club, and I wrestled with Frank Molinaro and Nico Megaludis a lot. So those guys definitely had an impact on my wrestling. And then kind of just the Ninny Line Wrestling Club in general being kind of a smaller, close-knit group, their personalities definitely rubbed off on me. Matt Brown was a WCAP world-class athlete program guy for the military. And so I definitely felt camaraderie with him. My dad being in the military and kind of growing up like that, I felt a little connection with him there. But yeah, I mean, we had a lot of great guys. And then more than anything, I think just the coaching staff, any question I had, hey, what should I eat for dinner tonight? The coaching staff has an answer for you. So those guys definitely made a huge impact on me, and still to this day, they make a big impact on me and determine kind of how I act and how I treat other people for the better. So,
Want to go back when you were in high school? Correct me if I'm wrong. You won a state title as a junior.
Won a state title as a junior. And then sophomore.
Okay. So you won it as a sophomore?
Won it as a sophomore. So I placed third in my freshman year. I won as a sophomore, and then I took second as a junior, and then I didn't wrestle.
Chad Red?
Yes, and interesting. I only took 2 losses at the state championships whenever I was in high school. My junior year, I lost to Chad Red in the finals, and then in my freshman year, I lost in the semifinals to Stevan Micic. So it's two pretty cool high school matches, and also both really accomplished wrestlers. Obviously, especially Micic just winning a world championship. So
Indiana high school wrestling, it doesn't have the depth of some states.
Yeah,
when you look at Red, Micic, a guy like Mason Paris, and I mean, I'm missing some. I mean, I'm going back a little bit, like Andrew Howe. I think Reese Humphrey won a state title there. Surtsis. I mean, and there's some, guys that there's a handful of guys, but a really good wrestling state. What went into that decision? Because you didn't see it. You see it a little bit more now, but you still don't see it a whole lot now. Skipping that senior year and going out to maybe a Colorado Springs, or in your case, going out to Penn State early. What went into that decision?
Well, I think my, personal goals had a lot to do with it, right? I think for a lot of people, I think the right decision is to complete, your senior year of high school and, go into prom and go and, take whatever standardized tests that you're taking with your classmates and doing your high school graduation. I think that's the right decision for most people, probably, because there's some serious, developmental steps there. For me specifically, I was already kind of, for good or for worse, I was a little bit more mature growing up. I think that looking at my personal goals for school and for wrestling, it was the right decision for me. And, I didn't have a lot of goals outside of that at that point in my life. So it just kind of made sense. And I was pretty ready to, move on with whatever I was going to be doing. So, and that doesn't mean I didn't have any good friends in Indiana. I had very good friends that I stay in touch with to this day. But at the time, I think it was just the right decision.
You have had a phenomenal career up to this point. Mentioned some of those big time accolades.
Sure.
But I'll tell you what my favorite accolade of yours is, and I've talked about this many times on broadcasts, and I still remember it. I mean, I've called plenty of matches, and there's a few of them that for whatever reason I just remember. One of them, 2018 national tournament. Ryan Deal from Maryland throws you on your back and sticks you first period. I think were you an 8 seed?
I think I was I may have been a 12 seed. Shane.
Okay.
Yeah.
At any rate, it was an upset.
Yeah.
You come all the way back and end up taking 5th place as a true freshman. What do you remember from that tournament, and what was the conversation like in your mind? How did you do it? Because that Nick, I'm telling you, that's what I personally was like. I like this Nick Lee guy. This guy's got some grit.
Well, whenever people ask me what's my favorite national championships, they're looking for either 2021 or 2022, the 2 years that I won it. But my answer is always the 2018. And I just remember that because me being a team-oriented guy, the team is very important. And if I, get down on myself, I'm like, oh, I can't win a national championship, and I decide I'm not going to wrestle hard and lose out to these guys, then my team doesn't win a national championship. And the conversation, to answer your question about the conversation in my head, I'm thinking I've got Bo Nickel, I've got Zane Rutherford, I've got Cale Sanderson, I've got Jason Off, I've got Anthony Cassell, I've got all these guys, Shakur Sheed. I'm missing some guys. I shouldn't have started naming names, but I got all these guys on the team, and they want to win a national championship, and I'm not about to be the guy that ruins this for these guys. You know what I mean? And that's maybe not the healthiest way to do it, but I knew that I had a job to do and that my teammates were relying on me to score points. And not because it's the end of the world if we lose, but man, how fun would it be? Because I remember the headlines going into it was how good Ohio State's team was and everything like that. And I remember that the headline right after we won the national championships that year was Ohio State, the best team to ever be runner-ups. I was like, that's pretty cool that the race was that tight. And that was a lot of fun because it was really hard work. I've never been that sore in my life. But at the end of the day, it was something where we had to pull together, and we all grew a little bit closer in that situation, and we all accomplished something. Maybe not, maybe I didn't accomplish my personal, materialistic goal, but I definitely made huge gains personally, in my own character. And I think that's more important to me going forward than, it would have been winning a national championship that year. So, easy for me to say in retrospect, but it was an incredible feat for our team. And I'm aware that I was a big part of it, but we had a lot of guys that did the exact same thing. We had other guys on the backside that went and scored points. So, and we also have the luxury of being on a team that is in a position to win those national championships. And so being on the backside, it means a little more. I'm 5th place in the national tournament is awesome, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about, dude, we gotta score. I gotta score how many more points so we can, be in this race. So that's kind of what I was thinking about. It was a lot of fun. There's, a lot of different elements to that tournament, but yeah, man, having a team that is chasing something and being able to rely on each other because each other are going to do their best, and there's nothing like it.
So you go fifth. You got the COVID year in 2020. Yep. You win it in 2021. You win it in 2022. At what point was there a point where you felt you maybe turned the corner? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, that's definitely a fair question. And the answer is I don't know. I really don't know. I think that it's hard to gauge where you're at in our wrestling room because our wrestling room is so competitive, right? It's hard. If I wrestle Zane Rutherford every day, I'm going to have a really hard time determining whether I'm getting better or not because the score may never change. You might just keep crushing me. So it's hard to tell, but you can kind of tell whenever you're in college and you're you're spreading the gap on some of these guys. So I think that there's just these little things that make a big difference. It's never, I'm never getting a little bit better all the time. It's like I feel like sometimes I make a big jump and then I'm the same for a little while. So yeah, I mean it's hard to answer because there's times whenever I felt like I've turned the corner and then I go and I like lose to some guy that I feel like I shouldn't lose to, right? So but that's interesting. That's what makes wrestling such an interesting sport is, you get into upsets and stuff like that and people come out of nowhere. I mean, we just had some high schoolers at the Clarion Open this past weekend, beating out, all Americans in college. So it's crazy, but that is what's fun about wrestling. So
when you look back, Nick, let me ask you this. When you look back in your career and you've had some time now to reflect and look back, what are a couple of things where you look back and go, the fact I did this and did that, and maybe at that time, you didn't realize how critical it was, but looking back, you're like, these two things right here paid huge dividends. How would you answer that?
Yeah. I think that listening to my coaches is a big one. And that's one that's pretty cliche, but there's times whenever my coach would tell me something, Coach Cody, I worked most closely with, and he would be like, this is what you're going to do, training this week. And I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure? Because that does not sound like, what I need to be doing, blah, blah, blah. But I did what they told me. And that probably made it easier mentally for me. And then I remember whenever I was, a freshman, I was having trouble with top bottom wrestling. And so every single day, Kale would come at the end of practice and he was like, you're down. So I got Coach Kale, who's, a lot bigger than me, obviously. And I would have to get 5 escapes. And he did not let me go. Like I had to earn those escapes. It was ridiculous. And it sucked at the time. And especially whenever I'd go and I'd wrestle with Zane and Nolf, and they would wrestle me and they would just like kick my butt, these older guys. And I mean, there's days whenever I walk out of that practice and I was like, I need to quit. Like I need to be done. Like, what am I doing here? Because my personality is, I didn't want to be good enough. I wanted to, contribute to a national championship. I wanted to contribute to that. And so, and I wanted to contribute to, the best team in the world or whatever we were trying to be. You know what I mean? So, there's a lot of things where it was really tough. And there were days when I was just like, wanted to quit. But I mean, that's a story everybody's heard.
What is the most meaningful or impactful? Again, there's probably a lot of them. I'm trying to dial in on one, maybe. The most impactful conversation you ever had with a member of that staff?
Gosh, I mean, these guys, probably with the exception of my parents, are shaped the man I am today. So it's hard to narrow it down, and I would feel like I'm disrespecting them if I'm picking one. But I remember really quick, like best thing that I can remember one of them saying, very short, is Jake Varner. Hey, you want to be the man? Yeah, then go be the man. Okay. So yeah, but I mean, those guys are I feel like every single day they tell me something that's like, oh man, I really need to chew on that for a little while. And so yeah, they're incredible people.
What is the most difficult loss that you ever had? Just the toughest loss that, for whatever reason, frustrated you? Just a tough loss.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a guy. I'm pretty laid back, even though I was, raised in a pretty strict household. I think people think I'm sometimes, this hard-nosed guy, like drill sergeant, but I'm a very laid-back person. So I really roll with the punches. And if you were to talk to me after like I lost a match, you wouldn't know that I was really upset. But I just don't like. I mean, no one likes losing, obviously. But in college, I'm trying to think. I would assume we want to narrow it down to college. There's definitely matches in high school that I lost. Well, no, I only lost 2 matches in high school. I didn't like losing either of those, but they were both really good wrestlers. Trying to think. I would say that my freshman year, whenever I lost to Ryan Deal, getting caught and pinned. Well, I don't want to see you getting caught because he got me. That was really a really good move that he was known to do. So he beat me, and I remember walking off the mat, and there's that temptation of like the temptation to kind of give up because it's like I just lost, and everybody in this arena, thousands and thousands of people, think that we just lost the national championships, and so that was a very tough moment, and I got to decide right now whether I agree with all these people or if I'm about to do something that is going to shock a lot of people. So we ended up coming back and we won it, which I think a lot of people didn't expect. But yeah, that was a tough one for sure. Not because it was personally hurt me, even though because every match that I lose personally hurts me a little bit. I don't like to lose. But that was one where it was like I needed to make some internal decisions about how I was going to proceed in that tournament. So
is it safe to say, along those same lines, but a little bit different, the most valuable loss was Big Ten Finals to Jaden Ironman in 2021?
Maybe. I would say that, he's obviously a very unique and great wrestler. And so I definitely learned some technical things from that match. Most valuable loss, though, trying to think for the wrestlers listening, every loss is like gold because those are the lessons that you're going to learn. It's hard to learn lessons whenever you win. You can, but it's very hard. But whenever you lose, that is gold. So you want to hang on to those losses and learn from them. And obviously, you don't want to keep losing, but in terms of just looking at things from a competitor, it's much easier to learn from losses. So, yeah, most valuable loss. I'm trying to think, I would say it was probably something closer in the beginning of my career. Yeah, I don't know. That you might be close. You might be close there, Shane. Hard to put my finger on it. You're asking big questions.
I'm just fascinated by this stuff. I'm just fascinated.
I lost a match to Tristan Moran, who at the time he was wrestling for Wisconsin, and he was a really good, crafty wrestler. And I remember I lost in like triple overtime or something to him at Penn State, and I remember that was like it was a match where I definitely wasn't ready to go, and did not. Well, maybe I did wrestle my best. It's hard to say at this point, but he just wrestled a much better match than I did, and that was an upset as well. And so I remember kind of taking away a lot from that match as well, in terms of preparation and how I approach strategy and stuff like that. So that was probably also a very valuable loss. So
I only got 171 more questions to ask you, so we'll move on to the next one.
Let's get them.
Because you just triggered something else about you said, well, I maybe wasn't ready. What put into context, Nick, wrestling at that level, you don't feel good every day. You don't feel good every day. How do you overcome not feeling good and knowing, quite frankly, nobody cares? You got to get the job done. How did you navigate not feeling your best every day?
Shane, to be honest, at this point in my career, if I feel good, I'm concerned. There's something wrong if I'm feeling too good. So, but yeah, I mean, that's how do you navigate it? I mean, I think the easy answer is you just got to be tough, right? Because like you said, no one cares. The fans are out there. They don't care if you don't feel good. They want to see you win. Your opponent definitely doesn't care if you don't feel good, right? So, but then your teammates, they probably care if you don't feel good, but they still need you to go and do your best, right? So there's just so many factors out there that are going to affect how you're interpreting, a situation where you're not feeling great. But at the end of the day, the most important factor is, well, what do I want to get out of this, right? If I'm going into a match, I'm not feeling good, I need to be able to look beyond the result of the match because there's a good chance if I don't feel good, maybe I'll lose. Maybe I'm really sick today and I can't perform my best. Well, there's some serious character building and, identity building and doing your best and making the best of a bad situation. And so I think that it's hard sometimes because we're so caught up in winning a duel or winning a match in the moment. We kind of forget the big picture of what I gotta, what kind of person am I? Am I the kind of person where if a storm comes and I got something that I need to do, I'm going to go inside, right? Am I someone that is going to run away from something like that? Or am I the kind of person that's can be relied upon even in a bad situation, right? Can I be relied upon whenever things aren't good, where, they're looking at, the team, we got 10 guys. It's like, can I rely on him? Nick, we got to make sure that he's, feeling good. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be the guy where it's like, we don't got to worry about him. We know he's going to give a good effort, whether he feels good or not. Like he's reliable, part of the chain. So, because that's how you make yourself valuable, not as a wrestler, but just as a person. And I think a lot of people that are in business hire wrestlers because of, that exact thing.
What's your discipline like? Like your lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I would say it's disciplined in a lot of areas, probably undisciplined in other areas. I center my life around faith, so that's is going to determine most of how I view life. But I would say it's probably not too different from most people. Obviously, I'm not doing things that are going to be unhealthy for my body. I do a little bit as we all do, but not as much as kind of the average person. It's a lot of training and staying healthy so I can um, compete. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty uneventful, I would say, as a wrestler. My big events are obviously competitions, and I'm not in school anymore. I'm working towards maybe some grad school stuff, but that's a conversation for another time. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty uneventful, I would say, and it's just a lot of focus on making sure that my body is healthy and also more importantly my mind is healthy. So
what are the biggest threats to excellence for you? I mean, it might be, I'm just making stuff up. I mean, myself, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but watch a little bit too much Bravo television, like
yeah.
garbage TV, but what are the biggest threats to excellence for you?
Sure. That's a really good question because there's a lot of temptations out there for people. Um, you know, for me, threat from excellence, I really don't think anything can throw me off of, um, you know, my love for wrestling, right? Other than, an injury or something, because at this point in your career, taking care of your body is so important. So I think that taking care of my body, making sure I don't get injuries is really important. And if there is, a big threat, it's that. But in terms of, my own actions and stuff, I don't think anything, whenever I'm looking at life, through the right lens, there's not anything that can, throw me off there. Whenever, you're doing the right things. So, yeah, that would be my answer. I don't know if it was a complete answer or not, but
what are non-negotiables for you? Like on a daily basis, like what are things that non-negotiable, your discipline, your habits, non-negotiables?
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm a little more laid back than a lot of people would, so I wouldn't say nothing's non-negotiable. Everything is up for sale. But for me, I want to get some sort of physical exercise in, right? I want to go out in nature, whether it's just a walk around the block or if I'm, going to practice. And then, for me specifically, and this is, like I said, specific to me. So I am, I start or end every day with prayer. I'm Catholic Christian. So, that's to Jesus for me. So, and I try to every single day focus my thoughts, my words, and my actions, um, and my approach and my desires towards that, towards that faith. And I think that whenever I do that and I'm focusing on the right things for me, focusing on the way, the truth, and the light, then wrestling and stuff and life and school and work and all that stuff, like that's all going to come to me, it takes the pressure of those things off, because you kind of realize these are things that shouldn't bring me stress, because they're things that I enjoy, and they're hard because they're worth doing. And so whenever my day is centered around, that view of life, then it makes it a lot easier. That doesn't mean I'm not going to stumble, here and there, obviously. But it makes it a lot easier whenever I do stumble. So,
okay. Talked earlier about some of the matches, mentioned the Big Ten final in 2021.
yes.
NCAA's a couple weeks later, RBY beats Dayton Fix.
Yes.
Coming out at 141. What are you thinking in the tunnel? I mean, what's going through your mind? You're wrestling for a national championship, wrestling against a really good guy, Niederman, that beat you a couple weeks before. Like, walk us through that night.
I'm thinking, man, this is really sweet. Like, I can't wait to wrestle. I really I was thinking, what was I thinking? I don't know. My mind was pretty clear, but I was just thinking, man, I'm really excited to wrestle on this stage. I've been dreaming about it. I always visualize myself on this stage whenever other people are wrestling, and I'm excited to go do it for myself and try to get a win out of this. So it was really exciting. And, I mean, I probably won't wrestle on a stage like that ever again in my life. So I'm just thankful that I got that opportunity.
You and I were talking about before we got on recording, and I said, we got to get back to this 3-point takedown.
Yeah, we did.
I mean, you were a guy that was tough on top, gritty wrestler, good in all positions, but you were a really, really good, you're a good freestyle wrestler.
Yeah.
You're a really, really good folk style wrestler. Your thoughts on the rule change with the 3-point takedown?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be frank, I do not understand it for the life of me. I just don't understand it. It's interesting, Shane. I tweeted out before the Nationals, or maybe it was after the Nationals, and I can't get back on my Twitter for some reason. They won't let me log back on, so I haven't tweeted in a while. I'm probably done with Twitter or X or whatever it is. It's unhealthy for me anyway. But I was like, why don't we just take away the escape point? And I was just kind of messing around with it in my head. But I don't understand where we're moving towards with this rule, right? I think the argument, if I were going to steelman the argument for the 3-point takedown, is it's going to create, it's going to create more exciting action on our feet, which is what the fans want to see if you were to steelman the argument, and it's going to help focus our efforts towards creating successful international wrestlers. And my argument against that is, well, the goal of college wrestling is not to create successful international wrestlers, because if it was, then we would just have freestyle wrestling in college. But we don't, because we've created a very strong culture around collegiate wrestling that a lot of people are interested in. And part of that culture is around top-bottom wrestling, tough top-bottom wrestling. And it's a unique style. It's a top-bottom wrestling, something that I had to work on a lot growing up. I was a neutral guy. And so whenever I was a freshman, I would have loved nothing more for them to make a 3-point takedown, right? But it's an area that I developed, and it ended up becoming, a really big part of my, my wrestling games, my top and bottom wrestling. And I know now whenever I come into practice and as an alumni, I get to wrestle with, the Penn State college guys, I'm excited to wrestle top bottom, because it's a whole nother element that's not in freestyle. It's like a chess match on top bottom, and it's different. And I think that's something that fans have grown to like and enjoy. And there's a lot of guys that made their living on top bottom wrestling that were maybe lacking in the neutral area, right? But it didn't matter, because they were going to reverse you, or they were going to throw their legs in, and they were going to win a match that way. And I remember a lot of my opponents, including Jay Ironman, they made a living off this stuff, and that factored into the match, right? And finally, the last thing I would say on this is, everyone talks about, well, not enough people are interested in wrestling. We got to grow the sport. Well, whenever you change the major rules every year, you're not going to grow the sport. People aren't interested in it. And we want to grow the sport, but we want it to be natural. We don't want to change rules and change things for to make people come into the sport. We have a good culture, and so our sport can speak for itself. I didn't join wrestling I was the first person in my family to wrestle. No one in my family wrestled before. I didn't join wrestling because the rules were interesting. I joined wrestling because there were really good people involved, and it was going to teach me good character, right? I mean, this is why people wrestle. They don't wrestle because they want to go. I mean, some people start wrestling because they want to be in the WWE, but they definitely don't stick with wrestling because of that, right? There's good reasons why we wrestle. So I don't know. I don't really agree with this change. I think it's probably meant to affect a few teams here or there, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, I'm with you, Nick. I got to be honest. I broadcast wrestling. I'm a positive guy. I want to give it a chance. Yeah. But you bring up a really good point, the strategy of top bottom wrestling. And that's where we started talking about the Ironman match. And I went to this because the main reason is the strategy that you guys implemented against Jaden Ironman. You didn't go on bottom in the national tournament. And that was a huge adjustment. And that stuff to me is just fun to watch play out. When you look back at that match, I mean, I just remember your emotion. I mean, you win that thing in sudden victory. You get the takedown. Can you put into words what you were thinking at that moment, being a national champ?
I was really excited, and it wasn't so much a feeling of I just won. It was like a we just won, right? Because my coaches and my family and my teammates put so much work into helping me get to that point. And every guy with the NLWC and every coach, they're going to come up to me and they're going to be like, "Hey, I've been watching your matches. This is what I think, blah, blah, blah." So like everyone is invested and we want each other to win. And that's how Penn State always is. We're very supportive of each other, but yeah. So whenever I won that match, it was more of a feeling of a team victory because I know that, my coaches and my teammates wanted that just as bad as I did. And that's how winning feels for me now. A lot of times is just, I feel like it's a team effort. I'm the guy that's driving the car, but if your pit crew is not good, then you're not getting back on the track. Right. So it seriously is a team victory. It's a team effort.
What do you remember seeing your mom and dad that night for the first time?
They were very happy. Because I put a lot of time and work in, yes, but I mean, I'm trying to think of how many sports cars my dad probably could have bought if he hadn't been paying to bring me to camps and clinics and just put a lot of time and money into that, right? And you don't even realize it until you win a national championship or you achieve some sort of goal. It's like, wow, like my dad spent a lot of time and material wealth to like get me to this point. And I understand even if I had lost, they have created, a good man with good character. But whenever you're sacrificing stuff like that, it feels good to get wins for sure.
If you could talk, Nick, to any competitor that you wrestled against that you haven't had discussions with, who's the guy that you've had battles with in the past? You'd just be curious to like talk to him and maybe ask him questions about, when we were wrestling here, this happened, and just kind of get inside their mind.
Yeah. Wrestling's a nice sport because generally you get to like talk to guys a little bit, right? A guy I wrestled a lot in college and who's fighting now is Mitch McKee, and I've exchanged words with him here and there, but he's like the strongest guy I've ever wrestled.
Okay.
And it does not surprise me. I always beat him, but I was always like, that was always a match where I was like, I need to be careful and on alert going into this match, or else, he's got, tricks up his sleeve. And he was a tough wrestler. And, it's always a match where I had to stay very disciplined, and he's kicking butt in MMA right now, which it doesn't surprise me one bit. Hopefully he goes and, I don't know what the peak of MMA is, Bellator, UFC, whatever it is. I think he's probably coming for a belt sooner or later. So, I mean, he was a cool guy from what whenever I talked to him, always seemed like a smart guy. So yeah, but he's a guy I think a lot of people forget. We wrestled so much in college, so we wrestled a bunch of times. And I was always sore afterwards. So
Yeah, he was tough. I mean, when I think about Mitch McKee, I think about the chest wrap. You know,
that
in freestyle, he had a killer chest wrap. But
yeah,
yeah, he's strong. Yeah, Mitch
trust me,
is.
I was thinking about the chest wrap too every time I wrestled him. So
So you win the title in 2021. 2022, you get your first Big Ten title. I was always bummed out that you didn't get to wrestle the match because
yeah.
injury defaulted out, but you won that one in Lincoln, going off of memory. Then you beat Clark from North Carolina, when your second NCAA title. What was different from that year? Because I mean, I'm going back. I mean, that year heading in, you had yourself. Micic was up to 41. Sebastian Rivera was at 41. Jay Nairman was at 4. Like, that was such a stacked weight class. And, you know, injuries, it just didn't go as people maybe had thought it might go.
Yeah, I mean, definitely different year. I think there was probably less focus on the 41-pound weight class because of all that. But I would say, you know, in my mind, the first year that I won a national championship, you feel like you're kind of on a personal journey for sure. And there was more of that aspect to it, even though, you know, our team was really important. But then that last year was my last year college wrestling. And I'd been in a leadership role for a while with our team, but I think that year it made a bigger difference having a team with, you know, a lot of different personalities and guys who are, you know, are looking for their way in wrestling and in life and stuff. And so I felt like I had taken on more of like a guide role for a lot of guys on the team, and I'm trying to, you know, help guys be successful in their experience, because I remember whenever I was a freshman and sophomore, I remember, you know, Zane and Knopf and Bo Nickel and these guys like helping me out. And I remember the lessons that they imparted onto me as older teammates. And I'm thinking those are invaluable. Like these are making me they're making me look at life in a much healthier way. And so I wanted to make sure that I was giving that to younger guys on our team. And I still try to do that to this day. So looking at it that last year more from a team aspect and making sure that I'm leaving a culture that is going to continue to be successful after I'm gone. Because, you know, we talked about it before. I win a national championship. You win a national championship. First thing they talk about the next day is who's going to win next year, right? It doesn't really matter at the end. I mean, it matters, but it's from my perspective, I got to think, you know, people are going to be talking about next year. And so more importantly is what am I leaving afterwards? And so, yeah, so that year I was just thinking more about, okay, I want to make sure that I'm, you know, leaving a good, I don't like to say legacy because I don't think your legacy really matters, but I want to leave it a culture that can continue to be successful after me, because I realize how much good it did me, and I wanted to do good for these young guys as well, especially in the world we're living in, man. We live in a crazy world, so it's very rare to have cultures like ours that can last.
You said something earlier before we were recording too. I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
I mean, this day and age, everybody's. I don't want to. Maybe it's not fair to say paranoid, but
yeah,
I'll use the word paranoid. Like, gosh,
sure.
gotta be careful. This guy's in the room, but I mean, you and Bo Bartlett, you guys have that the battle. You that was, you know, he thinks he won or whatever. They bring it back. You won and ultimately get on the world team. But I just asked you, I'm like, you guys, you know, I was curious, like, you guys wrestle in the room a lot, and answer that.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We're each other's main training partners, right? And I expressed that whenever I was getting ready for the world championships and stuff, he's my training partner, and he's making sure that I'm ready to go and making sure that I want to win. And then as he's going into his season and he's wrestling his opponents, I want to make sure that he wins, because we train together, we put effort into each other, and so it feels really good whenever you put that effort in and your teammates winning, right? And then also just from, you know, the way I try to look at that is I don't want him to look back on his career and say, oh man, like everything was really good, but like Nick Lee, that older guy, he never wrestled me because we were competition, and he never helped me get better or anything like that. I want him to look at it. And I want him to look back and say, I had a really, supportive, older group of guys on the team. And so that's kind of the way I look at it, because, I ended up wrestling Zane in the Olympic trials one year, and he was like the first guy to offer to wrestle me and help me out. Like, he never hid anything from me. There was never any like hiding strategy or anything like that. Like, that's not really a way to live life, in my opinion. And so I want, like I said, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about. Is I want to make sure that I'm leaving a good culture, because hopefully, whenever I'm gone out of Penn State room, there will be other older guys that are wrestling that are thinking the same thing with their younger guys that they're probably going to compete against. I want to make sure that I'm leaving a good culture that is supportive, and forget about, wrestling and wrestling accomplishment, making sure that we're leaving a good, treating people in a way that is going to help them and help me too. Because once again, Shane, like, no one remembers at the end of the day how many national championships or what your statistics were, right? They remember, how did this person treat me, right? That kind of thing. So that's kind of the way that I think about it.
Before the next question, Nick, I just got to tell you, you're the man. I mean, Jake Lerner said, if you're going to, you are the man. I mean, your perspective is just so, I think the word that resonates in my mind talking to you today is refreshing. Like, it's good to know some people still get it. Because this world is all about results and stepping on people and getting to where you got to get and only worrying about yourself. And you're right. At the end of the day, it's like, how does somebody make you feel? I mean, and I'll give you a real quick story. Sure. And you're kind of coming into this realm also. I just don't know you as well as the example I'm going to give. Barry Davis, long time head, coach at Wisconsin. I mean, one of the best ever. I mean, Barry Davis, one of the best wrestlers ever. And I've gotten to know Barry over the years. I've spent a lot of time with him. And he's such a good human being that when I think about Barry Davis, I don't think about wrestling anymore. I mean, when I first started to hang out with him, do some stuff with him, I'd be like, holy smokes, it's Barry Davis. Like, I was a little bit like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it's Barry Davis. And now when I think about Barry Davis, I automatically go to like it sounds kind of crazy. Like, oh, that's right. Yeah, I mean, I forgot. He's a friend of mine. He's helped me in so he's been there for me in some tough times. I love the guy. And it's like, oh, that's right. I forgot. Barry Davis was a real good wrestler. And I've always loved me some Nick Lee. I've always loved some Nick Lee toughness and grit. But talking to you up, the more I talk to you, it's kind of like, oh, that's right. He's a really good wrestler. But
he recruited me while I was in high school. Whenever he coached at Wisconsin, he's an awesome human being. Yeah,
he's great. I got to ask you about the World Championships.
Sure.
What was that like for you in Serbia?
Yeah, I mean, it was really awesome. Just with the best wrestlers in the world, it's an experience, man. It's something that I definitely am, taking. I'm still kind of reflecting on that kind of thing, but being around all the people, we have a sport, and all the people there are, the best at this sport in the whole world. So it's a really interesting place to be in, and you see kind of different personalities, and just on the Team USA team alone, a lot of different personalities and people with incredible accomplishments, and getting to be a part of that team is very interesting, and you get kind of a view into other people's worlds, and it was awesome. And then on top of that, I get to represent, the United States of America, which is awesome to me, right? I always thought I would be in the military because my dad was in the military, and I realized I didn't want to do that. And so I guess this is like the next best thing, not even near comparable, but, getting to have, the Team USA flag, on my uniform is pretty awesome. It's a blessing. So it was really awesome. It's a great experience, something that I'm gonna, cherish forever. So
what was the biggest takeaway from a learning perspective? What's something that you feel like you had to experience where it's like, man, now that I've actually experienced this, I think that can help me? How would you answer that?
Sure. I think that, and this is actually comparable to, your first college match or your first high school match, is there's definitely there's another level with international wrestling whenever you're wrestling the best guys in the world, and they have a a different feel and a different give and take and a different pace than in college wrestling. And so feeling that for the first time, and I'd been to a couple senior level tournaments before that, but not that many, I think like 2. So feeling that and getting used to that, there's a learning curve. And so that was, really interesting and really valuable, just getting the experience. And so I think that's comparable because in college is the same thing. You get from high school to college and there's a big learning curve, right? You can be a 4-time state champion in high school and you wrestle college guys. And sometimes there's a big learning curve, right? And that's why I always tell high school wrestlers or young college wrestlers, if you're redshirting, wrestle in as many opens as you can, just to get that competition. So yeah, I think just getting the experience of wrestling guys that are used to wrestling at a particular caliber that you're not used to is very beneficial. And it's definitely something that you gotta get used to. I would say it's more rare than not to just, step up to another level like that and just be ready to roll. So
you beat Yanni to make this world team. Nick, when I look at your career, 2021 against Ironman, I mean, you're never the sexy pick. And that's just the reality. I mean, you're never the sexy pick. Do you feel, I made this comment with somebody not that long ago. I'm like, Nick Lee's the most underappreciated wrestler. When I think about guys that are like underappreciated, you come to mind for me, right or wrong. Do you ever feel disrespected? I mean, your personality doesn't seem like that you could just kind of business head, but how do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to be respected or appreciated, right? It's just not what I'm made for. But yeah, I mean, I can't say I think about it that much. Honestly, I don't like to have a lot of attention on me. I'm a very solitary guy. Like, it makes me uncomfortable whenever I have people that talk about me or anything like that. Because I don't know, it's just not the message that I want to give, I guess, because to be honest, Shane, I mean, most kids are not going to be national championships or national champions, right? So, so there's got to be something other than that, right? It's really, at the end of the day, it's really cool, but most kids are not going to be national championships. So what can I give most kids, right? And I think for me, it's more about message and character, but like you said, that's not always the sexy thing. So it's but like I said, I'm not here to have eyes on me. I don't really care.
Few more questions for you. I could talk to you all night.
Yeah.
You are going on a cross-country trip from State College out to Southern California. It's you and 3 people, not your, I'll say this, you and 3 people that you've never met. What 3 people are you taking?
That I've never met before?
That you've never met. Who would you take?
Cross-country trip. I think I would take, that's a great question. I've always been interested in Jordan Peterson stuff. I think he'd be interesting. I might get tired of him after a little bit, but I think he'd be an interesting guy to take.
I mean, excuse my ignorance. Who's Jordan Peterson?
Oh, actually, I changed my mind. Well, no. Maybe I'll keep Jordan Peterson. But my other 2 positions, you're gonna get shockwaves from this. I'm gonna take Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I want both of them in the car with me. So, and we're gonna figure it out.
So who is Jordan Peterson? Who's this third guy? I don't even know who
he's a guy. He's a clinical psychologist out of Canada, and he wrote a book called 12 Rules for Life. And I think it's a pretty good book. But he kind of made waves in Canada and in the United States. And I think his big thing is he's helped a lot of like young men out of tough situations with kind of his 12 rules for life. And so I always thought he was a really interesting guy. Looks at the world in an interesting view and a lot of ways in which I agree with and I don't agree with, but always like he never looks at something on the surface level. Whenever you kind of see him speak and write, he always looks at things a little bit deeper, which, you don't always need to do, but I think it's interesting whenever you have someone with that mind. So
I'm going to ask this next question, Nick.
Sure.
I've never asked anybody this in an interview, but
Sure.
I always want to.
Sure.
And it's a little bit out there, but I'm just curious, the human side. When's the last time you cried? What's the last thing that's brought you to tears for whatever reason?
Trying to think. I think it would probably be. It was definitely like a time that a teammate lost or something like that. And I'm trying to think of when it would be. Because with my mindset and stuff, it's not that bad. Losing is not fun, but it's not too bad. So it's a great question, Shane. I don't cry that often. I don't think about things super deeply, but I would probably say it had to have been a time whenever I had a teammate that like didn't achieve a goal or something like that, or maybe like a parent or something. I'm not sure. That's a tough question. I don't cry really. There's not much to cry about in my life, thankfully. So
yeah. It's one of those questions I've always thought it's like just a random question, but I just think it's interesting just to show everybody that everybody's got emotions and
I mean, I have cried. I just don't know. I'm having a hard time recalling the last time. So
if I mean, obviously everything that's happened to you, that's why you are the man you are today. But if you could go back and change one thing and you have to change something, what's one thing in your journey that you would have changed at a certain time, even if it ended up paying dividends when it was all said and done?
Try to think. I think I would say I came to my faith a little bit later. Whenever I was an adult, I mean, it's easy to say that whenever I was a kid, if I would have taken it a little more seriously, but I would say if I had taken it a little more seriously as a kid, I think that could have paid off. But I think that's a pretty tough ask. Whenever you're a kid, you don't really worry about that kind of thing. So
where do you keep your 2 NCAA brackets and your Big Ten championship bracket? Where are those?
My brackets, I'm going to be honest, I think my brothers have them, or my mom or my parents. I have my NCAA bracket in my room, I think, but
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully they're somewhere safe. So.
What's your most prized possession that's not, I mean, what do you have that's like the house is on fire and you're going in to get it?
Gosh. I would say, geez, I don't know, Shane.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't have a lot of things. I have a little, it's a wooden carved chest, and it was handmade by a craftsman in Afghanistan that my dad got it from these the Afghans and brought it back whenever he was in Afghanistan. I don't keep anything in it, but I wouldn't want to lose that. I think it's like a thing from a part of the world in which I probably never see. So I think that might be something that I don't want to lose. But other than that, I don't know.
Tell me about your business.
Sure. Yeah. So my business is called Wakia.
Where'd you get that name?
So I'm a history buff. I like history, and it's a Lakota word, and it's a Lakota word for thunder being or thunder spirit. And I thought that was really interesting, and I kind of did some research on it, being a history guy, and my dad helped me out as well. And actually, the Wakia, he was kind of the first guy that brought that word up to me. But I was thinking about things, our inner power, because I think we all are capable of great things. Sometimes it's not the things that we think they are, but we're all capable of great things, right? None of us are meant to be average. So I was kind of thinking about the inner power, and Wakia is like just this word that came up, and I was like, okay, I can do some branding with this. And I wanted to kind of figure out a way that I can, take my experience and put it into the business world. And one thing I do, I've spent almost every waking moment in athletic and or athleisure apparel. So I was like, okay, I can definitely do something with this. And I'm a guy with a pretty particular style. So I try to create some, high quality products that people can enjoy while also, supporting me and stuff like that. So I run it all on my own. And it's a project that I do, and I get a lot of really good support from a lot of people. And yeah, it's just high quality athletic apparel and athleisure apparel that people can, if they're interested, they can go to wakia.store. That's WAKINYAN.store. And I think everything's 20% off right now. So little sale. But yeah, it's my company.
Where do you see yourself, Nick? Final question for you. Where do you see yourself in 20 years? Like, where do you see yourself?
45. I don't know. It's a great question. I mean, yeah, I think I would be silly to try to guess at this point in my life. But I mean, hopefully, leading a healthy, faithful life. So,
well, Nick, I can't thank you enough for this. I mean, this was awesome talking to you. Appreciate the time, and thanks so much for joining us here on the Going It podcast. You are one of the good ones, and it was a pleasure calling your matches. Excited about your future. You're not done yet, but you're a good seed. You are a good guy.
Hey, anytime, Shane. I always appreciate talking to you.
We'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, Nick.
Yep. Bye-bye.